Ladies and gentlemen, let me begin with a truth that may shock you. At 92 years old, a woman can outwit the doctor, outlive her enemies, and still outtalk the preacher, and yet, she will tell you with a straight face, "See, darling, men think they know everything, but they miss the most important thing." That's a fact. Body, you see. When wisdom has had 9 decades to marinate, it becomes something rich, sharp, and unforgettable. I had the honor of listening to a 92-year-old woman who has loved, lost, worked, danced, and seen the world turn upside down at least 4 times. And do you know what she told me? She leaned in, with eyes as clear as glass and a voice as steady as truth itself, and said, "Men don't need more money. Men don't need more muscles. What men need, what few men truly know, is gentleness. Gentleness, not weakness, not softness without spine, but the rare kind of strength that listens more than it shouts, that holds a hand instead of pointing a finger, that chooses patience over pride." This elderly queen, yes, I'll call her a queen, laughed as she recalled how many men thought success was measured in paychecks or trophies. But at 92, she said, the real prize is not applause from the world. It's whether your children call you with love in their voices. It's whether your wife still smiles when you walk into the room. It's whether your friends, old or new, say, "He was kind to me." That's the legacy. That's the fact. Closing, so gentlemen, and the wise women listening too, here's the torch she passed down. Gentleness is not a weakness. It is the very art of being unforgettable. You can own businesses, win medals, and drive the fastest car in town, but if you don't master gentleness, the world will forget you. If you do, you will live forever in the hearts you touched. True wisdom comes with age because life itself is the greatest teacher. A 92-year-old woman carries within her more lessons than most books could ever hold, and those lessons are not theories or philosophies. They are lived experiences, refined through joy, suffering, love, loss, mistakes, and triumphs. Every wrinkle on her face is like a paragraph in a story, every pause in her voice a punctuation mark reminding us that wisdom is earned, not inherited. It is not something you can buy, borrow, or pretend to have. It is forged slowly, across decades, by paying attention to what really matters when the noise of life eventually fades. When people are young, they often mistake knowledge for wisdom. Knowledge can be learned quickly. Anyone can pick up facts, memorize rules, or master skills. But wisdom takes years, sometimes entire lifetimes, because it depends not just on what we know, but how we use it. A 92-year-old woman knows that plans fail, hearts break, people leave, and sometimes the world does not bend the way you want it to. She has lived long enough to see that stubbornness often hurts more than it helps, that time always reveals truth, and that the things people chase so desperately, money, fame, attention, do not bring the peace they promise. Her wisdom is not just intellectual, it is practical, humble, and deeply human. Wisdom from age also carries perspective. Someone in their 20s or 30s may believe that every problem is permanent, every failure is catastrophic, and every heartbreak is unbearable. But the elderly know better. They have survived world wars, recessions, pandemics, social upheavals, and personal tragedies. They have seen the world collapse and rebuild itself again and again. A 92-year-old does not panic at temporary storms because she has lived through hurricanes. She knows that no pain is eternal, no joy is everlasting, and no mistake is so great that life cannot go on. Her calmness in the face of crisis is not denial, it is perspective, the kind that only comes after decades of watching life unfold in cycles. Another layer of wisdom that age brings is gratitude. The young often live in hunger for more success, more love, more possessions, more recognition, but someone who has lived over 9 decades has already walked that road and discovered its emptiness. She knows the value of the small things, a warm meal, the laughter of family, the beauty of a sunset. She is not impressed by the glitter of wealth, nor is she easily fooled by the arrogance of power. She has seen rich men die lonely, strong men become weak, and clever men make foolish choices. What endures, she says, are the simple joys of love, kindness, and companionship. That realization is not easily won. It comes after years of chasing illusions and finally understanding what matters. Wisdom also brings honesty, the kind that is unafraid of judgment. A 92-year-old woman does not waste time pretending. She has no energy for masks or the false polish that many people wear in younger years. Instead, she speaks truth with courage, sometimes with humor, sometimes with bluntness, but always with clarity. She can tell a man, "You don't need more money, you need more gentleness," and she can say it without hesitation because she has no agenda left but truth itself. This authenticity makes her advice piercing and unforgettable. You cannot ignore someone who has lived through nearly a century telling you what really counts. The wisdom of age is also deeply tied to acceptance. In youth, people resist change, fight against aging, and struggle with letting go. But a 92-year-old has already faced those battles and has learned to surrender gracefully. She knows that beauty fades, strength diminishes, and time cannot be controlled. Instead of resisting, she embraces these truths with dignity. That acceptance itself is wisdom, because it teaches younger generations that peace is not found in fighting the inevitable, but in welcoming it with courage and serenity. Finally, the most powerful aspect of wisdom that comes with age is the ability to distill life into simple truths. While the young complicate everything with overthinking, the elderly refine their lessons into short, powerful statements that strike the heart. Gentleness is strength. Kindness lasts longer than money. Love is the only legacy worth leaving. These are not cliches when spoken by someone who has lived nearly a century. They are distilled truths, boiled down after decades of watching what works and what fails. To listen to a 92-year-old woman share her wisdom is to glimpse life from the summit, where all the noise of climbing fades and the view becomes clear. Her words are not just advice, they are a roadmap drawn by time itself. That is why true wisdom comes with age, because no matter how clever, ambitious, or intelligent we may be in youth, we cannot rush the lessons that only years of living will teach. Wisdom is not in the speed of the climb, but in the patience to walk through life long enough to see what really endures. Men often miss the most important lesson because society trains them to chase the wrong trophies. From a young age, boys are taught to equate manhood with strength, power, and dominance. They grow up hearing that their worth is measured by how much money they make, how high they climb in their careers, how well they can provide, and how stoic they appear in the face of pain. They are told to be winners, to conquer, to compete, and to suppress anything that might look like weakness. In this endless pursuit, many men forget something essential: the quiet strength of gentleness, patience, and empathy. That is the lesson that slips past them, not because they are incapable of learning it, but because the world rarely gives them permission to see it. The elderly woman who lived 92 years understood this with clarity. She had watched generations of men chase wealth and status, believing that these would secure their happiness and legacy. But time revealed the truth to her. She saw that while men built businesses, won wars, and earned applause, many of them failed in the one place that mattered most: the relationships they carried with family, friends, and loved ones. The applause eventually stopped, the medals gathered dust, and the money changed hands. What endured was how they treated the people around them. And too often, in their pursuit of proving themselves, men missed the chance to be gentle. Gentleness is not a trait that comes naturally in a world that praises hardness. For men, especially, it can feel like a contradiction. They are taught that to survive, they must always be tough, assertive, and unshakable. Yet the very people they love, children, partners, parents, friends, do not need a man who is unyielding. They need a man who listens, who comforts, who chooses understanding over pride. The tragedy is that many men only learn this when it is too late, when their children grow distant, when their marriages crumble, or when loneliness creeps in during old age. They miss the lesson because they were too busy competing with the world to connect with it. The 92-year-old woman had seen this pattern so many times that it no longer surprised her. She told her story with laughter and sadness mixed together, shaking her head at how men so often misunderstand what makes them truly admirable. In her eyes, it was never the loudest, the strongest, or the wealthiest men who left the deepest impression. It was the gentle ones, the ones who held a hand without being asked, who listened without rushing to fix, who offered kindness without expecting recognition. These men might not have been celebrated in their lifetimes as much as others, but they lived on in the hearts of the people they touched. That, she insisted, is the lesson so many miss. The irony is that gentleness is not weakness but strength under control. It takes far more power to be calm than to lash out, far more courage to forgive than to seek revenge, far more discipline to listen than to dominate. Gentleness is the strength of a man who knows himself well enough that he does not need to prove it with aggression. But because the world rarely defines masculinity this way, men overlook it. They believe that showing patience makes them vulnerable, that offering tenderness makes them less manly, and that admitting fear or love somehow diminishes their worth. And yet, What their loved ones crave most from them is precisely what they withhold. This is why the wisdom of the elderly woman carries so much weight. She had 92 years of observing human nature, of loving and losing, of watching men succeed in society but fail in intimacy. She saw men who died rich but were mourned by few. She saw men who commanded respect at work but were strangers in their own homes. She saw men who could fight battles but could not sit quietly with their children. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that they had missed the most important lesson life tried to teach them. That gentleness is not optional, it is essential. If men could see beyond the false lessons society hands them, they would recognize that real manhood is not about being feared, but about being remembered with love. It is not about how much you accumulate, but how much peace you bring into the rooms you enter. The men who learn this early are rare, but they are also the ones whose legacies endure. The elderly woman's advice was not a criticism, but a gift, a call for men to stop missing the lesson and start embracing it while they still can. At the heart of it, what men miss is not an abstract idea but a lived truthy. Gentleness is what allows relationships to thrive, families to stay united, and communities to grow stronger. It is the thread that binds love to respect, and without it, all other achievements eventually unravel. That is the lesson too many men overlook, and it often takes the voice of someone who has lived almost a century to make them hear it clearly. The power of gentleness is often misunderstood in a world that glorifies force, speed, and dominance. To many, being gentle sounds like being weak, passive, or submissive. Yet true gentleness is the exact opposite. It is strength under discipline, courage wrapped in patience, and wisdom expressed through kindness. It does not mean avoiding firmness or lacking conviction. It means choosing a calm, measured response when anger or aggression would be easier. It is a conscious decision to lead with compassion rather than control, and that makes it one of the most powerful forces in human relationships. When a 92-year-old woman insists that gentleness is the lesson most men miss, she is not speaking of softness that surrenders or fragility that breaks. She is speaking of a kind of quiet strength that has the ability to heal, to restore, and to transform lives. Gentleness is what allows a father to kneel to his child's level and listen instead of scolding. It is what enables a husband to respond to his wife's frustration with understanding instead of defensiveness. It is what allows leaders to guide without intimidation, teachers to instruct without humiliation, and friends to support without judgment. In each case, gentleness does not diminish authority, it deepens respect. The power of gentleness lies in its ability to disarm hostility. Anger begets anger, force breeds resistance, but gentleness can break cycles of conflict. A calm word in the face of insult can diffuse an argument. A patient response in the face of provocation can halt escalation. A gentle presence can comfort someone in despair without needing to solve their problems. This power is not loud or dramatic. It often goes unnoticed because it does not demand attention. Yet its effect is profound because it shifts the atmosphere of any interaction. People remember those who were gentle with them in their moments of vulnerability far more than those who overpowered them. Gentleness also requires a kind of inner strength that few realize. It is much easier to lash out, to assert control, to dominate with words or actions. Those are immediate and impulsive responses. Gentleness, however, requires restraint. It asks a person to hold back anger, to master their pride, and to place empathy above ego. This is why gentleness is powerful. It is not the absence of power but the mastery of it. A man who can lift heavy weights but cannot control his temper is not strong in the fullest sense. A man who can conquer nations but cannot speak kindly to his own family has missed the point of power altogether. The truly powerful person is the one who can be both strong and gentle, fierce when necessary but tender when needed. There is also a timelessness to gentleness that outlasts many of the qualities society praises. Money fades, status shifts, appearances change, but gentleness is remembered across generations. A grandmother who sang softly to her grandchildren, a teacher who encouraged instead of shamed, a friend who listened without rushing to judge, these are the people who live on in memory. They did not need grand gestures or monumental achievements to leave their mark. Their gentleness itself became their legacy. That is its quiet power. It shapes lives without fanfare and leaves an imprint deeper than words. In personal relationships, gentleness creates trust. A gentle person is safe to be around, not because they lack strength, but because they choose not to misuse it. Children who grow up with gentle parents feel secure in expressing themselves. Partners in a marriage where gentleness is present feel valued and respected. Friends who treat each other with gentleness find that their bond endures through disagreements. Trust, once broken, is hard to repair, but gentleness has the unique ability to rebuild it. It shows others that they are not in danger of being crushed by someone else's pride or temper, and that assurance becomes the foundation for lasting connection. Gentleness also amplifies influence. Harshness may enforce obedience, but it rarely inspires loyalty. A gentle leader, on the other hand, earns respect not through fear but through compassion. People are drawn to those who treat them with dignity, even in moments of correction. This is why the elderly woman insisted that gentleness is not optional. It is the true measure of how one will be remembered. The applause of the world fades, but the memory of how you made others feel endures. Ultimately, the power of gentleness is that it reflects a deeper understanding of what it means to be human. Life is difficult, full of loss, hardship, and struggle. Everyone carries burdens unseen, fears unspoken, and wounds unhealed. Gentleness acknowledges this reality and chooses kindness anyway. It asks nothing in return, but in giving itself freely, it transforms both giver and receiver. To live with gentleness is to live with wisdom, for it recognizes that the strongest impact is not made by force but by love. That is the power the 92-year-old woman understood, and it is the lesson too many overlook until it is almost too late. Redefining success is one of the most liberating truths a person can discover, yet it often takes a lifetime to realize it. From childhood, society paints a clear but narrow picture of success: money in the bank, titles before your name, trophies on your shelf, and applause following your every move. These markers are displayed as evidence of achievement, and those who reach them are celebrated as winners. Yet, as the 92-year-old woman so wisely explained, these measures are not the true essence of success. They are fleeting, fragile, and easily forgotten. Real success, she insisted, is not about what you acquire, but about what you give. It is not about how high you climb, but about who still loves and respects you when the climb is over. The traditional definitions of success often leave people restless and dissatisfied. A man may accumulate wealth only to discover that it brings him no peace. A woman may rise to the top of her career only to feel lonely at the summit. A family may achieve the lifestyle they once dreamed of yet sit at dinner tables where silence is louder than conversation. The 92-year-old woman had witnessed this countless times, watching men and women chase after images of success that promised happiness but delivered emptiness. She saw people spend decades in pursuit of things that vanished in moments, and she realized that real success had nothing to do with possessions or public recognition. Instead, it had everything to do with relationships, kindness, and the legacy of love. The redefinition of success becomes clearer with age because time strips away illusions. In youth, applause feels intoxicating. It convinces you that you matter. In adulthood, achievements seem to prove your worth. But as the years pass, the applause grows faint, the achievements blur together, and the medals tarnish. The elderly know that success measured by external validation is temporary at best. What remains when the noise fades is how you lived and how you treated others. Did you bring peace to your home? Did you raise children who feel secure in your love? Did you support friends in their darkest hours? Did you carry yourself with honesty, patience, and integrity? These, the elderly woman declared, are the real standards of success. One of the most striking truths she offered was that success is measured not by what the world says about you, but by what those closest to you feel about you. A man can win awards and be admired by strangers, but if his children grow up resenting him, what has he truly achieved? A woman can lead an empire and inspire thousands, but if her partner feels unseen and unloved, where is the victory? Success at its core is not about being known by the masses. It is about being cherished by the few who know you best. That kind of success requires more than talent or ambition. It requires gentleness, sacrifice, and a willingness to prioritize love over pride. Redefining success also demands a shift in values. The 92-year-old woman reminded us that what we treasure most at the end of life is not what we owned but who we loved. Few people on their deathbeds speak of wishing they had earned more money or worked more hours. Instead, they speak of wishing they had forgiven sooner, spent more time with family, or pursued passions that brought them joy. Success in her eyes was not a race to be won but a garden to be nurtured. It was found in laughter around a dinner table, in the trust of a loyal friend, in the gratitude of someone you helped without expecting anything in return. Those moments, though small, form the fabric of a meaningful life. This redefinition also challenges the dangerous illusion that success is individualistic. Society often praises self-made men and women, but the elderly woman had lived long enough to know that no one truly achieves alone. Behind every so-called successful person are teachers, parents, friends, or communities who shaped and supported them. Real success acknowledges this truth and gives back. It is measured not by how much you rise above others, but by how much you lift others with you. The wisdom of redefining success is ultimately about peace. When you no longer chase the world's definition of success, you stop comparing yourself constantly to others. You no longer feel the need to prove yourself through status or possessions. Instead, you anchor yourself in values that cannot be taken away: kindness, gentleness, honesty, and love. These qualities never expire, never fade, and never lose their worth. They outlast every worldly prize and become the true measure of a life well lived. The 92-year-old woman's advice to redefine success is a call to awaken before it is too late, to stop running after what looks impressive and to start building what lasts. To measure your days not by how many people clap for you, but by how many people are grateful for you. To understand that real success is not about being remembered by history, but about being remembered fondly by the hearts you touched. That is a success no one can take away, and that is the success worth living for. Legacy is built on kindness because, in the end, people do not remember the size of your bank account, the titles you held, or the possessions you accumulated. They remember how you made them feel. A 92-year-old woman who has lived long enough to see lives rise and fall, fortunes gained and lost, and reputations made and destroyed understands this more deeply than anyone. She knows that kindness is the currency that endures when everything else fades. A legacy is not etched in stone buildings or corporate achievements alone. It is etched in the hearts of people touched by gentle words, compassionate actions, and the grace of simple humanity. Throughout life, people are taught to compete, to strive, and to win. Success is often measured by comparison: who has more, who has gone further, who has achieved faster. But when someone reaches old age and looks back, the things that seemed so important lose their shine. The promotions, the trophies, and the applause become distant memories, and what stands out are the moments of kindness given or received. The elderly woman's wisdom reflects this truth. The men and women who are most fondly remembered are not necessarily the most powerful or accomplished, but the kindest. Their names live on in stories told at family tables, in the laughter of friends remembering their generosity, and in the gratitude of those they helped without seeking recognition. Kindness has a unique way of multiplying across generations. A parent who treats their children with patience and care raises adults who often carry those values into their own families. A teacher who shows kindness to struggling students may never see the ripple effect, but those students grow up carrying that memory, often passing it forward. Even the smallest acts, a smile, a listening ear, a word of encouragement, plant seeds that grow into legacies far larger than the moment itself. The 92-year-old woman understood that kindness is never wasted. It may seem insignificant in the moment, but over a lifetime it builds a reputation and a memory that outlasts wealth and status. What makes kindness such a powerful foundation for legacy is its universality. Unlike wealth or talent, kindness is not limited to a chosen few. Anyone at any stage of life can choose to be kind. It requires no special education, no financial status, and no position of power. Yet despite its accessibility, it is one of the rarest treasures because it demands selflessness. To be kind is to place the needs of another, even briefly, above your own. It is to soften pride, to pause judgment, and to extend humanity. This, the elderly woman knew, is what makes a person unforgettable. You may not remember the details of someone's success, but you will never forget how they treated you. Kindness also has the ability to heal. Many people go through life carrying unseen wounds, losses, disappointments, insecurities, fears. A harsh word can deepen those wounds, but a kind word can ease them. Kindness does not erase pain, but it offers comfort that makes pain bearable. The legacy of someone who was consistently kind is therefore not just in happy memories, but in the quiet relief they gave others during dark times. People may not even have the words to describe it, but they will say, "He made me feel safe," or "She made me feel understood." Those feelings linger far longer than admiration for wealth or position. The elderly woman also pointed out that kindness often reveals itself most in the ordinary, not the extraordinary. It is in how you treat waiters and clerks, how you speak to children, how you handle disagreements, and how you respond when no one is watching. These small daily choices form a pattern of character that people remember long after your presence is gone. A life built on kindness is not necessarily glamorous, but it is enduring. In the eyes of those who loved you, that consistency becomes the essence of your legacy. There is also an unspoken truth: unkindness is remembered too. People do not easily forget cruelty, arrogance, or indifference. A person may be brilliant, accomplished, and admired, yet if they are unkind, their memory is tainted. The 92-year-old woman had lived long enough to see this play out. She could recall powerful men who were feared in life, but forgotten in death, and ordinary people who were cherished because they had been kind. The difference was not in their achievements but in their character. At the end of the journey, kindness is the thread that holds one's story together. It is what makes children and grandchildren speak with pride, what makes friends smile through tears at funerals, and what makes strangers remember you with warmth even decades later. Legacy is not what you leave for people in material terms, but what you leave in them, the kindness that shaped their lives in some way. The elderly woman's wisdom is simple yet profound. Kindness is not optional if you want to be remembered well. Every act of kindness is a brick in the foundation of your legacy, building something far more lasting than wealth or fame. When the noise of the world fades and all that remains are the stories told about you, those stories will be written in the language of kindness. And that, she insisted, is the truest measure of a life well lived. Gentleness makes you unforgettable because it leaves an imprint on the heart that time cannot erase. Long after people forget the details of what you said, the numbers you achieved, or the possessions you owned, they remember how you made them feel. And gentleness, above all other traits, has the power to make people feel safe, valued, and deeply seen. It is the quiet strength that transforms ordinary encounters into lasting memories, and it is the reason why those who master gentleness are remembered long after others fade into obscurity. Many people spend their lives trying to be remembered through greatness as the world defines it. They chase wealth, recognition, titles, and status, believing that these are the markers of legacy. But history has shown that these fade quickly. Rich men are forgotten within a generation, powerful leaders are replaced, and achievements are eventually surpassed by others. What endures is not the magnitude of accomplishment, but the depth of human connection. Gentleness is what creates that connection, because it communicates something universal: you matter, you are safe, and you are loved. Gentleness is unforgettable because it touches people at their most vulnerable moments. A gentle word in the middle of grief becomes a memory carried for decades. A gentle hand offered in illness or fear lingers in the mind long after the crisis has passed. The child who grew up with a gentle parent may not remember every lesson taught, but they will never forget how they felt comforted, protected, and encouraged. The partner who experiences gentleness in a relationship carries it as proof of love. Even strangers who encounter gentleness in fleeting moments, an act of patience, a kind smile, a word spoken softly, can carry that impression for a lifetime. Gentleness imprints not on the surface but on the soul. The elderly woman who spoke these truths at 92 had seen countless examples of lives lived loudly but forgotten quickly, contrasted with lives lived gently and remembered deeply. She knew that the people whose names were spoken with warmth decades after their passing were not necessarily the most successful in worldly terms. They were those who had been gentle with others. She recalled men who had lived harshly, strong, proud, and commanding, only to be remembered with bitterness. She also remembered those who lived with gentleness, whose families, friends, and neighbors spoke of them with tears and gratitude, saying, "He was kind to me," or "She always made me feel welcome." Gentleness became the quality that made them unforgettable. One of the reasons gentleness lingers so strongly is that it is rare. In a world that prizes aggression, speed, and control, gentleness feels almost revolutionary. People expect criticism, competition, or indifference, but they are surprised and moved by kindness and patience. That surprise makes gentleness memorable. It cuts through the noise of harshness that fills so much of daily life. When someone chooses to be gentle instead of angry, patient instead of impatient, forgiving instead of vengeful, they stand out in the memory like light in the dark. The rarity of gentleness magnifies its power to leave a lasting impression. Gentleness also creates a bond of trust that outlives circumstances. When you know someone will treat you gently, you feel safe being your truest self with them. That trust is never forgotten because trust itself is fragile and precious. A child never forgets the adult who treated them gently in a world that often overlooked them. An elderly person never forgets the caregiver who offered dignity and tenderness. A friend never forgets the companion who responded with gentleness instead of judgment during a difficult time. These memories form stories that are retold, and in that retelling, the gentle person becomes unforgettable to future generations as well. There is also a spiritual quality to gentleness that transcends time. Harshness and pride may build temporary power, but gentleness builds something eternal. It does not seek recognition, yet it is the very thing that people cling to when they reflect on who mattered in their lives. At funerals, it is not wealth or status that is celebrated most, it is the stories of gentleness, how someone comforted, encouraged, forgave, or cared. Those are the stories that keep a person alive in memory long after their physical presence is gone. Gentleness is unforgettable because it is a form of love made visible. Love is not always dramatic. Often, it is shown in quiet restraint, in listening without rushing, in holding back anger, in choosing words that heal instead of wound. People recognize that gentleness takes effort, discipline, and courage. It is not instinctive in a world where self-protection and pride dominate. That is why it feels so precious when experienced. A single act of gentleness can outweigh years of indifference, and a consistent life of gentleness becomes a legacy that shines brighter than any monument. The 92-year-old woman's wisdom rests on this truth: achievements may fade, appearances may change, and names may be forgotten in history books, but gentleness engraves itself on the heart. It is not about being remembered by millions, it is about being remembered by the ones whose lives you touched. And in the end, that is what makes a life meaningful. To be unforgettable is not to be great in the eyes of the world, but to be gentle enough that the people around you cannot forget how you made them feel. That is the true power of gentleness, and it is a legacy worth striving for.